Yeah, that is Shostakovich. I have played one of the, I believe, is the first piece, and although there is very little information about it, there are some scholars and some academics who say that this was the very first, but there are other publications that state in editorials and big names and in the classical music and in the academic music perspective that this was not the first of the piano works by Shostakovich. And eventually there is no recording of what we're about to talk. But I played it just to mention, you know, in today's day and age, musical composition has come to a point in which it depends on whether or not you are good at pianist. It depends on whether you're a good pianist, and the role of the piano player has changed over the years for the piano player. It might be that at the beginning, the harmony structure, the harmonic rhythm, the melodic lines, that everything belonged to the harpsichord, and as a basis for the orchestra, and the violin will do the main soprano with the melodic position for the violin on the harpsichord, and then the rest of the ensemble will do the baritone tenor with melodic position of each instrument, and in the mid of all that, accompanying from motion and melodic development on each of the accompanying possible melodies on each position: soprano, contralto, tenor, basso, and the bass was also exactly for a very simple line, because the cello was always solo bass, or in some cases cello solo with accompanying of a double bass. But in any case, that role of being the whole orchestra with the timbre of every side, of every melodic position, of every voicing in the melodic development and its direction, although it has changed because later on it became more important as soloist when chamber music came into play, and then when God was no longer the center of the cultural development in Europe, it became the human-centric expression of art, and religion, or at least Catholic music, started to be a little discontinued. Some other people, not necessarily devoted to religion, but devoted to music and to virtuosism and other techniques, who knows, maybe they were also religious, but they were not making religious music per se, and the role changed to be a piano soloist in front of the string quartet, and then the piano soloist in front of the orchestra. But then a huge shift happens here with the musical form concerto, because concerto adds this logic that the sonata had at the beginning, which is ABA or ABBA or ABCBA, and it opens up the possibility for using symphonic colors. These symphonic colors add to the logic of texture in the sense of melodic texture, which relates to counterpoint, the many species of counterpoint. But in essence, when you add colors, symphonic colors, to a counterpoint, it makes it florid, and the florid counterpoint means that there is a notion of monophony, heterophony, monophony, paraphony, and heterophony, and each of the voices that you're having. But for the case of an orchestra with a concerto, it is giant. And what you handle with those is that every three instruments, every three timbres, you mix a certain notion of counterpoint, a florid counterpoint, with another three textures of timbral textures, whether on the same instrument section or with other mixed sections. Like, I always like to think of the violin solo with harmonics accompanied by a moving flute and everybody in pizzicato, and the rest is silent, waiting for the thing to change. That's one color. And if you start making combinations like that, you obtain symphonic colors. And in front of all that was the virtuosity of the piano soloist. Then the role changed and keep changing and keep changing. Piano has changed so much. And so I think I play that just to be part of the historical reference that there is. My phone is ringing. 1 second. Of the historic archive of Dmitri Shostakovich works. I know it is a bit prolific in today's day and age in which Russia is at war with Ukraine, because basically Shostakovich was victim of the same story we are seeing repeated 880 years ago, where he was a musician. They engaged in war, and he said, I don't necessarily like to have an artistic expression that relates to winning a war through music. Can I do something else? And then they went to prison. they sent him to prison. And then he was like, fuck, I cannot be a pianist and composer and all the things, because the government says they want to be in war with everybody, and if I don't superfluously make a fanfare for that, I will get into jail. And he decided to go to the United States and become a lawyer, and do other things, because he knew that his rights were being violated somehow. And it's the same story today, but with this idea of approaching his music for piano, I want to archive some of these little details, of which there is no recording available yet because of the confusion. And I am I am a customer of a very special sheet music store, and they have these sort of antiquities that they sell because for collector's editions and things such as that. And I have come to this piece. It is said to be the first one, and I believe it is the first one because in the score, in the partiture, it states that it is in fact the number one in C. And I don't know, but others, in other publications where I see the first one, it says in A minor number one. So if you know the truth, please enlighten us in the comments. If you don't know the truth, I don't know it either. But existing information on the 5 preludes is scarce, not only on the first one. And although first published in 1966, these preludes are among Shostakovich's earliest creations. They originally belonged to the still unpublished set of 8 preludes, opus 2, composed between the autumn of 1919 and the spring of 1920, each carrying a dedication to a friend or a relative. Among Shostakovich's fellow composition students were 2 gifted musicians, Georgy Clements and Pavel Felt. When the 3 young composers decided to combine their talents to create a cycle of 24 preludes for piano, Shostakovich contributed 5 selections from his opus 2, the preludes in A minor, G major, E minor, and F minor, and one of the 2 in D flat major. The project was eventually aborted. However, Shostakovich's 5 contributions were published in 1966, the year of his 60th birthday, under the title 5 Preludes. Though clearly the work of an immature composer, the 5 Preludes exhibit features that would become trademarks of his mature piano style. A transparent and laconic texture in number 1, 2, 4, and 5, counterpoints number 1, 2, 3, 5, and ostinato in number 1, 2, and 3, and high registers in number 1. We're gonna see why, but they are short, attractive pieces of average difficulty. Number 3 is the most demanding. Number 1 and 5 are the easiest. And I'm gonna play another one just to get in the vibe. But let's find out. And I think this is really interesting because of its virtuosity. And I was saying that the role of the piano player has changed because for a composer the story has always been different. No matter how good of a composer you were in ancient times, you needed to be the best piano player in order for you to be allowed to present an audition, an exam, and the preparation for the exam for composer, for starting the composer journey at a university or a conservatoire. And the problem with that approach is that what happens if you have great ideas and you have practiced piano like 7 times in your life because you were playing viola all the time? Will it be impossible for you to understand the techniques and theories used in composition from the perspective of music theory? I believe no, and that is my case because I was a cello player. And when I came to composition, I grasped everything immediately. I understood that you have to be able to dissociate the many species of counterpoint in order for your composition to make sense in a development direction without using the piano. And my fellow students were not so fond of that technique because they needed to hear, they needed to see, and they needed to experience the fact that the music is happening. Whereas I, on my own, I was holding the music in my mind, in my imagination, in my memory, all this esoteric void that we cannot explain, but is there because although we cannot touch it, we can explain it, and we can perceive it, and we can experience it. And so it is a bit of a double-edged sword, but regardless of that, the role has changed a lot. And the role has changed a lot in the sense of whether it is a tool or a prerequisite. I believe it is a prerequisite in a good sense because they want you to have the best tools and the best rudiments for you to be a good composer, a good student of composition. But I think it is not a requirement per se. Regardless, in today's day and age, if you want to make electronic music and be creative, or if you want to score for a movie, for a video game, for a TV show, for a jingle, you need to understand how the piano behaves, because if you think about it for a second, when you are making an exercise, extremely pedagogical exercise, a dynamic exercise of simply practicing your skills. Sometimes people never practice. That is my case, and I know I don't have a moral authority to say this, shut up. But the point is, some people require the rehearsal. I don't rehearse ever. Let me tell you something. I have rehearsed for the past, I have almost 20 years of making music since I was 10 years old. So there is a lot of things that I no longer practice because I have long memorized them. And if you want to get to that point, you need to practice 7-8 hours daily. That was my journey. So I am here in a solid basis, and I have, 200 releases, 150 releases out, because I have this, the dominion of the concepts is already easy nature. So yeah, and regardless of that, sometimes when you're doing exercises for upping up your game and practicing the skills, one of the best examples of a good exercise for academic perspective is to reduce orchestral music to a piano reduction. And when you have a piano reduction, you understand everything the way it is moving, in a piano sense, horizontally, because music always moves horizontally. It is not that you place, the person who says, if you cannot make a chord, I know how to solve your little problem, and they stuck these piles of cement in a vertical sense, and that is a chord, period. And to me, it is like if that chord were to last 2 seconds, your song lasts 2 seconds because you were imposed cement over there, and it needs to flow like blood. So it is really delicate and it takes years to master. It is not the drag of one click. It serves nothing. And the MIDI Corpax solution solves no problem because music is not a problem. It makes you look stupid. It makes you look mediocre. Sure. And yeah, so the point with practicing and rehearsing your skills is that it polishes your technique. Once you get to a recording with a polished technique, is different as when you have a good technique developed. Like, the very basic in a university, regardless of how good the university is, I tend to think that universities in small towns, as much as in big cities, are very much the exact same. Just it depends on what you do or how much effort you place on it. It doesn't matter. I mean, you don't have to go to Juilliard, you don't have to go to Berkeley to be a good student. You have to do it on your own, and you have to put all the time, and you have to put all the effort, and you have to see all the results and be critical enough to say these results are horrible or these results are somewhat better. When a teacher says, let's try this and obtain this result, the professor probably does it in the following sense, in the following direction. He takes a book of exercises and etudes and gives you one and says, this exercise is for you to learn how to articulate between finger 4 and 2 without using the third one, so that you gain flexibility but also learn how to articulate. Play it fast, play it slow, and see the differences and memorize it. But that is a really short approach, and there is no more time. He cannot spend the entire semester on you only on one exercise, so you have to put the other 80% of the work. And it's good to do that, and it's important to do so, because then you will level up. But if you don't do so, you will still gain so much progress. And that's when I say that you can even have a super polished technique, like domination of the concepts, absolute world domination, or you have good understanding, good grasping, you never make mistakes. That's a well-developed technique. Regardless of that, understanding and reducing orchestral music to piano reductions is a way, and so it becomes a tool. And so if you understand the piano, you have a good tool. Now, if you use Renoise or if you use any tracker, in order for the music not to stall, it is very much like a plane, an airplane on a flight. You know that for landing, planes, they usually never use the assisted landing, because the weather influences so much, and if there is so much wind, the thing will start to stop automatically, because it loses the touch of sense whether the distance is near or far away, but it doesn't has this ability to remember whether or not you are lowering the machine, the plane, the entire thing. And so what happens if you do assisted landing is that the plane will stall. Stall is a definition of, you have to land at 192 nautical knots, and if you do it a little slower than that, instead of the plane landing swiftly, slowly, super soft and charming, it falls to the ground in front of the airport. This is a very stupid mistake, like the guy who died trying to get inside a helicopter. Nobody falls to the ground on a helicopter trying to get in, right? Be a professional, don't be a mediocre. The MIDI Corpax solution solves nothing, sure. And yeah, so this, in order for the music not to stall, it is very easy with trackers that you feel that the music is not moving anymore, and that you need to repeat the pattern, and that you need to repeat the same pattern another time with a variation for it not to stall. But you don't want to feel all the time that you have a warning emergency saying, oh, the plane is about to crash to the ground, because you don't do anything. You want to swiftly, relatively fast, relatively quick, and relatively articulated, relatively alive, because that's the whole point of having music, that it flows through your mind, goes to the ears, and it flows through the speakers because of the air pressure that is applied on them. These kinds of things. And Yeah, moreover, you need to be spontaneous. And in a tracker, it is very difficult. I think, for example, of Logic, that you have thousands of space and system resources to load. I don't know, the big ones, the big leagues. Uh, Speedfire Audio, for example, that's a giant over exaggeration of a giant one. But let's suppose that you have the ability and the skills to figure it around, toy around with it, and fool around and find that the result of what you're doing is really, really professional. It sounds really cool. Um, it could be with a smaller thing like a 303 in a drum machine. Regardless of it, if you were in Logic and using the horizontal way of importing your MIDI or editing the MIDI score right there, it will be way easier if you had these skills. But even if you don't have them, it is not as difficult as within a tracker. Anyway, in both cases, you will require the piano to be your tool. So although this might serve as the archive of Shostakovich early works for piano, I think it is more of a companion for your opinions and perspectives on composition when applying these techniques to interpretation. Some instruments can do the exact same things that I'm gonna be telling you here, with a different tempo, with a different intention, with a different character, with a different dynamic, with a different kind of legato, with a different kind of phrasing, with a different kind of separation or union, with a different kind of texture, with a different kind of monophonic, paraphonic, heterophonic approach, with a different kind of variation, with a different kind of theme, with a different kind of harmonic accompaniment. So many things that you can make different out of what I'm about to say, that the Unison MIDI Core Pack will never be able to suggest. The Unison MIDI Core Pack can suggest one beat. That's all it can suggest. And music is never about one beat. It's about thousands of variables approaching thousands of notes, not only one. So that's if you are new to music or to musical composition, don't buy MIDI Core Packs because they only stall your ship. For real. It is like those people who go to the gym and start injecting chemicals and start injecting anabolics and steroids and Red Bulls and all this chemical toxic poison inside their body, and then they are such a phenomenon, horrible with mutations, and then they don't understand why. That's what's gonna happen to your brain and to your mind and to your spirit and your heart and to your good intentions, and your feelings are gonna be injured by yourself because of making so many mistakes. Don't make the mistake of buying a MIDI core pack. That will destroy your creativity. Trust me. I am one of the, I believe, without ego, without any self-centered opinions, but I think I'm gonna pass to the human history as the bastard who claimed to have 200 discographic productions. Yeah, in 20, 50 years when I die, and people say, do you remember this bastard? He's got 200 discographic productions. Normal humans with normal brains tend to do 2 per year, if so. And this guy was never outside of the studio or whatever. He had a time machine. I don't know what the fuck he had. Has many interesting things, because it results in, it turns out to me that my music is very interesting to me. I spend a lot of time enjoying my music, not only composing and editing and thinking about it, or thinking the next move, or planning a series or whatever, but I enjoy it a lot, and because I find it creative, and that was my main intention at the beginning. When I talk about music, and when I say that the musical instruments and the entire instrument of the entire entity of music as an instrument for something, I mean it. And I try to have as a neutral opinion in terms of that, because you need to be free of your opinion. Stop being your own judge. And once you pass that story that you are very good because you consider that and you have no reference, but instead you embrace a reference that is strict, that has high standards, then you know that your music is shitty. Then you will be able to stay certain years in silence on your own, saying, no, this is not the way I want this to sound. I want this to sound different. And you don't need to compare yourself to other artists, because that's why music theory comes into play. That is where it says, this is the standard, this is the basic, generic, tasteless, without any ingredients. And from here, you start your journey. So I have come to many experiments and many crazy ideas, and they have resulted even crazier as what I thought. So I wanted to make this series of videos on musical composition starting at the piano, because I consider it to be a good tool. And so the techniques that I want to explore may apply not only for Shostakovich early works, but I think also for musical composition, regardless of what you want to do. I apply many of the techniques explained and studied here to many of my songs. One of the obvious one is this one. Let's figure it out here. Does it recall something on you? This is the section of Lluvia, my 3 songs EP, where it's an EP of 3 songs, and it very often uses this same pattern of having 4 notes repeating themselves on a cycle over a series of seconds: minor second, minor second, minor second, descending scale, interval, big interval and long notes, and then repeats itself, and then the same descending scale, interval, repeats itself, but a 4th over. And that's the same, and then the same, a 6th below, and then a 3rd below, and then a 4th over, and then a 2nd below, and then a 7th below. And it's like a sequence of things. But yeah, why not? Look at this section. And it is really fast, because that's Shostakovich, a virtuoso for the piano. But regardless of it, in the same story, I did it, but way slower. I did it at 200 BPM subdivided by 12. So although it might seem super fast, it is not super fast because it is subdivided, and the articulation is way more detailed, has a lot more resolution for the subdivision. Most people think that it is a problem to start at 200 BPM because you will never be able to see other than 2 notes, the long one and the short one. But it is easy if you be careful, if you're careful about it. I'm gonna play this piece to make a little controversy here, because I don't know if this is the piece I'm about to talk about, and if you know, let's figure it out and let's make sense out of it on your own and enlighten us in the comments. And if not, I think I'm gonna make it just for fun. Yeah, and this well, we were saying that clearly the work of an immature composer shows quite a bit of his talent, regardless of what I have played already, because it falls into the controversy of whether or not this is a prelude with fugue, and whether the prelude, it can be played separately from the fugue, and the fugue is a little longer. I truly have the documents in my library. I have them here at home, but I'm not gonna check them out yet because I started the video recording and it was such a pain in the ass to set up the entire stream, and now I don't know if I did it correctly, and instead of interrupting everything that I am doing, I'm gonna keep my main plan, which was talking about composition and not the prelude and the fugue. Yeah, so the point with Scherzando is that there is not too much room in a quick piece for scherzando. Scherzando is a technique in which it's a dynamic technique. Dynamics in the sense of pianissimo, pianissimo, piano, mezzo piano, forte, mezzo forte, ¿qué? Sí, yeah, forte, forte, mezzo forte, fortissimo, fortissimo. And it deals with the intensity that you play each note. In the intensity of each note, don't buy the MIDI Unison Corpac solution, please. Don't buy any music solutions. Any at all. Just create them yourself. You can. It's easy. And you will love the result more than anything else. It's like buying McDonald's and saying, oh, it's the solution to the problem of being hungry. It's not a problem. And cooking is a way of medicine, not a way of intoxicating. So please be conscious about it. And Scherzando, yeah, the challenge here, because Scherzando is a dynamics technique in which you apply a specific amount of strength and pressure and volume and levels to each note, but at such a speed and such fast thing, it becomes complicated. But in terms of composition, in terms of its shape, it has the form section A, section B, section A. It's a three-part form with a coda, and it has the section A is 8 bars long, and the section B runs from bar 9 to bar 14, and then section A runs from bar 15 to bar 24. You could have thought about it in measures, which is also very cool if you think about it, because it gives you more space. And so before you start doing your entire thing, writing the music or passing it from the paper to the tracker, you can set out how many tracks are you going to use, how many measures are you going to use, how many bars are you going to use. And although they are already empty, you are giving them the shape, so that you don't get tired at the fourth bar and don't know where to go or what to do. Instead, cut it out, and then once you are a new day and you know how I feel, and you know how I feel, it's a new day for me, Taylor Swift. And regardless of that, you know that you're tired, and that the next day you say, I'm like, oh, fuck, this ended up interrupted. I interrupted and intervened in the wrong neighborhood. And the elegance and transparency, of this prelude are reminiscent of Grieg's piano miniatures. And I'm talking about the prelude in A minor, the number 1, which was dedicated to the composer's sister Maria Shostakovich. For example, the Elves Dance, the Opus 12, number 6, and many of which were in the repertoire of the young Shostakovich. The predominantly high register A below middle C being the lowest note gives the prelude something of a puppet dance or music box flavor. Notwithstanding the gentle contrapuntal touch and occasional harmonic piquancy, for example, the last 16th note in the measure 11. And I don't know if you remember this from Impressionism, but in Impressionism, you do things such as this. And I think it is here. Right? I don't know if you can see it. It's because I wanted to show it. On the right hand, at some point you get to play the notes that belong to some intervallic development. Whether it is melodic or harmonic, it depends on the interpretation that you're doing. But yeah, it is more or less like that. When you use the definition occasional harmonic piquancy, because in Impressionism, I don't know how to represent it in painting, but in music, you don't make a statement or a definition of the harmony. You developed. the harmony. You develop the harmony, and once you develop it, you have the option of keep developing melodic statements and another melodic statement and symphonic fragments, and things are evolving. And at a certain point, you might want to use a dyad instead of a full chord because it is too heavy. That's why I hate so much these MIDI unison chord packs, because they are so basic and so generic that they force people to convince them into think that the only way to establish harmony is to use 4 notes, and then your song like bam 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 bam. Horrible, because it has plenty of voices on it, and you need to be an artist, no a hammer player. Hammer solution to them. Sure. So it is recommended that the tempo must not be overly fast. The marking is allegro moderato, but fast enough to bring out the scherzando character of the music. Scherzando, again, is the technique that allows you to use the strength that you place in every note at high speed with a vivace character of interpretation. Like every note is a vivid experience of what's going on. That's scherzando. And for this prelude, it is said that a speed within the range of quarter 68 or 75 will accommodate both elements of Shostakovich tempo marking. And of course, avoid this. Or better yet, do it like this. Do it like this. But never do it like this. No. No. Sounds horrible. Or for example, at the end, when they start accelerating at the end. No, that's bad taste. Don't do it. It injures my heart. Don't do it. Right? So, no. Avoid the temptation to accelerate, particularly going into downbeats. Give the main melody, which is located at the first measurement between 1 and 8, a clearly articulated crisp staccato within the piano mezzo-piano range, and you will feel that it lasts longer than the injection of adrenaline if not avoiding the temptation to accelerate descending. No. And so observe the accents, but do not allow them to interrupt the flow. And this 8-measure phrase should evolve in a single breath. Right? And one way to look at it is that if you have different breaths, the definition of breath in music always come to the definition of phraseological aspects. What is one natural conclusion and question for an inexperienced student of musical composition is, how long is the shortest phrase? How do I know that I'm not making a motif? A motif can be tam tam ta tam. Good, that's a motif. And what you do with that motif, whether you develop it and declare something else, and when you put a main theme, and then you put the phraseological aspects to develop that main theme, and then you announce a slow movement, and then whether you develop it and add a plagal or authentic perfect sort of conclusion to it, it's totally secondary, because you know that it is a motif. But how long is a phrase? A phrase, because in music you need to be, and some composers that I admire and respect so much, they say that music is about running a marathon. And composition is very much like it, running a marathon. And running, if you think about it for a second, running a marathon is never about running fast. It's always about maintaining a long story. And for that, I think breadth comes into play by saying that the shortest phrase is the shortest is as long as the shortest breath you can take and you can maintain. It's up to you, and you might find that the first results of your first compositions and your first phrases may not be accurate enough. It doesn't mean that you're lazy, I'm lazy. No, yeah, I know you're lazy. And maintain an even pianissimo dynamic. One of the most interesting techniques that I have come to play and see. I have here. I think I have an example of it. I don't know. Let me see. I think it's here. Let me see if it is here. Yes, I don't think we're gonna get back to it again. But let's find out something else. Let's wait till it does its job because it's giant. But one of the techniques that I want to develop these days with the new album that is in progress, that I'm not gonna tell you how it's called, it's a surprise and it's a beautiful surprise. But regardless, what is this? Why is this so short? Yeah, is that sometimes when you apply a pianissimo on super fast notes and they are intelligible, they are easy to read, but you maintain them and everything is changing around them, is a beautiful technique. It's really special. Right? So what I was trying to maintain, I think it was here. Yeah, I think it was here. So I mean, that is also a very special one, in which you saw that the main melody had appeared here and there a few times, and the bass was moving super fast and a constant ostinato and the thing. Yeah, this one. Bueno, sorry, I have plenty of things happening behind this. Sorry, people at Apple Computer Inc. will kill me if I tell them how many processes I am running in the background of this thing. But I don't want to stop them. M20, and yeah. Yeah. What time is it playing? And we can see it in the exported version. It is happening at 3:07. Give me just 1 second. Yeah. And open the piano thing for a second. And I have it here somewhere. Give me just 1 second. 3:07. Right. Because I am uploading tons of things and I am downloading tons of things, and I truly don't have the time, because, for example, I'm installing Where Winds Meet, and it's worth 100 gigabytes of download, and the peak is 26 megabits per second on mobile internet and on the disk usage, and the thing is an SSD, but still a peak of so much. It's quite heavy on any recent computer, I know it, but yeah. So let's find out what I wanted to mention before. Let me connect this to the OBS. I think it's super loud, and I don't know if it is intelligible enough. And I don't know if I should lower the volume. Do you think I should lower the volume? No? Yes? Let's lower the volume for a second. No, it's sounding great, stupid. This is the phrase that I wanted to mention before. This is what comes next here. I sorry to interrupt, but this is what comes next because it has the postponed version of a long note that interrupts the coming phrase, the beginning of the next phrase, but then it doesn't happen again. And so it shadows a little this amount of small duration notes happening over and over, iterating over it, as everything changes around it, and then it doesn't shadow it. You see, this was the repetition. There was no bass present, interrupting the beginning of the thing, and probably the shadow of the resonance and the width of the resonance might not be apparent here. So the idea is that although there is no shadow and although there is no big object resonance with a big width, it should be that the piano definition and the pianissimo dynamic doesn't increase its volume. It remains really silent. And then it happens once again, as remember that when you iterate over something, you have plenty of options. Some say in a mediocre sense that repetition is important for music, but that's from the perspective of a mediocre instrument player, not a composer, because it ignores so many important details. Like a composer will tell you that shape and form is given, and somebody will say, no, repetition is not the notion of shape or form, repetition is boring. And that's because the person has a serial killer problem and might be dehydrated. I don't know if you can see the difference of the thing. So I cannot assume that you have a super well trained ear, and I don't know if you require a well trained ear to detect the differences between one or the other. So I'm gonna play it here just for a second, and you get to decide whether or not it is being heard or not. But I placed it really small on the mix because it was perceivable to me, so I consider it to be in my criterion, in my opinion, because I am against this policy that states that all instruments must be at the most possible volume, loudest level for it to be considered recent or trendy music. I disagree with that. I really disagree with that. There's music and there's artists and there's dynamic and there's perspective, and I don't know who the fuck came out with that stupid theory. That's the whole phrase. Let's hear it on its own. And this is the beginning. And so on and so forth. And this is happening really small and really tiny here, maybe relating to this, that is really tiny. And yeah, it's really tiny, and I like it because of that. Of course, I'm not saying you cannot use them loud, but the downside of using it loud is that it might look so fake that people will notice that your music is disintegrating its synchronization via hertz. You see, it's quite a physical, complicated matter in which you have to draw a triangle to obtain that triangle on a Cartesian plane to obtain an imaginary number. And you obtain one real number and another kind of number. And the other kind of number must be measuring the ups and downs of your wave, and if it is synchronized by hertz, you might obtain that it is at 50 hertz all the time. And you have, if you measure it with pi, you have 1 pi, 2 pi, 6 pi, etc., etc., etc. Or by multiples of 90, you have 90 degrees, and then the 90 times 2, and then the 90 times 3, and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you have them multiplied by 90 every time. But that is the most fragile way of syncing a wave shape. Unless, of course, you have medium tension electricity or high transmission towers for high transmission voltage, it won't stay synchronized because it won't have that strength. And you can't put that strength inside a computer. So it is a little illogical and incoherent to do so, because I don't know if you have felt this example on hardcore and terrorcore music, where you can recognize it is a bad producer because it's DJing on a turntable, and the turntables go out of phase although stay synced. And that's one of the downsides of using this kind of old technology, that if you don't use it correctly, I'm not stating anything against it, I don't know how to use them, they were born before I was a playing in my mother's nature, but regardless of that, the turntables have certain subtleties that require an expert professional composer before going the track to the actual vinyl, because else you will feel that there is a person with a 10,000 techniques set up there for a turntable, and the shit goes out of phase. No, how come? And that is because they place the limiters, they place 4 limiters at minus 6 decibels, minus 12 decibels, but it doesn't include the fact that they are extremely loud at the time. And when they came up to another thing, they placed the same 3 limiters or more for the bass or for the kick, which by means of the example might be the bass using the kick, and everything is out of phase, perfectly synced on a turntable. Well, don't, no. And so that's one of the downsides of using that same technique of fast moving notes. Although it's crazy to think that moving notes is always the same note in the same pattern because it is rhythmic. That's not the correct way of doing it. The correct way of doing it, let me show you an example. I have it here. I posted a short yesterday with the synthesizer doing exactly that. And what it is doing is it is doing super fast motion with interruptions of the development of the face. Let me find it. Yeah, right. And if you are an electricity geek like I am, and you wanna explain with an imaginary number and with a real number what's gonna be happening, you can see the exact motion of the Watts triangle. If you look on the right, this is how it behaves. This is a three-phase madness sort of thing, and it keeps it consistent because it is on the base. So regardless of what it is doing, it is injecting so much power in a dynamic sense. That's how, for electricity geeks, here we have it. Enjoy. Yeah. Ah, yes, right. I was thinking about it here. Yeah, let's hear what this three-phase madness sounds like. And I don't recommend you inject this into an electricity system without the caveat of I don't know what you are doing, but it sounds crazy and it feels cool. You can't hear anything. I'm sure you can't hear anything because I'm saying you can't hear anything. What the heck? I can see I have like 7 minutes with this thing turned on, and I'm sure you don't hear anything. Now you can hear it. Good. Awesome. And it repeats with other variations, but it is the exact same story over and over. It's a giant loop, and if you want to replicate something similar or go crazy with it, it is the CS80 version of the Japanese classical synthesizer done by Arturia. CS80 version 4. And that's one of the ways in which you can do the same technique with super forte kind of dynamic, but then you will have to introduce that motion instead of on your hand that is interpreting the instrument. You will route that. You will create a routing system to the gator, and once you set that, you fit that into the gator. Whatever you do and happens to be on the tracker is gonna be one amplified and then cut by the gator, and it adds certain distortion. And if the patch had distortion, it sounds really interesting. So there are ways to approach it. It's not to say that it is forbidden to use, but certain things are forbidden. So, as I was saying, observing the accents, and accents very often tend to interrupt the flow. So try to not allow them to do that. And this 8 measure phrase should evolve in the single breath. if you think about it, here in this example, I was saying that the breath, the more you subdivide things, the more you create delegates and delegates, the more you delegate, the better it is for the phrase, because the more sources of air it will have. So if you hear the bass that I just explained, you may think, well, this is a breath being interrupted over and over, but it is being complemented by other things on the same aspect. So sometimes you create a phrase out of many instruments that complement one line. I know you can't hear anything because I just played it and you didn't change your face, or you hate me, one of two. No, I'm wrong. That's not the one that I wanted to use. I wanted to use the other one. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's this one, and because I say this because phrases sometimes are thought of one long melody that happens to have this or that behavior, but that is a bit of a vague notion, a vague definition, because what happens if it doesn't? What happens if it is there and has no purpose and is a line of 8 bars? You can use it only once. So that is the purpose maybe of symphonic colors reduced to a tiny version of a symphonic color. But eventually, because it is interrupted every now and then by the gator, you could have thought of it as a long loop, looking at how long the loop is by watching it happen in the tracker, but it also can be complemented. And so eventually most people have a harmonic description in their minds of what is a audic expression, and they never get interrupted by anything in their lives, I know, but it was not the way I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be complemented. And sometimes the speed is not achieved by using a super fast articulation. Sometimes using the super fast articulation and the interpretation of the instrument make the music slower. So you will have to measure the electrical levels of the thing to obtain this imaginary number that we were talking about. And if you have the imaginary number and if you have the real number and you can do something about it, then you might come up with the combination of flexibility and continuity. So you can, in the A minor prelude, you can maintain an even pianissimo dynamic for the right hand ostinato. And remember that if you think about it for a second, this is a technique of ostinatos. You're all the time trying to iterate over the same musical idea over and over with certain purpose. And if you keep your right hand pianissimo, you can avoid making accents together with the left hand. And you can play these repeated thirds sempre staccatissimo with a loose wrist, never allowing your fingers to leave the keys. Sounds like a complicated one. And in measurement 9 to 12, the melody shifts to the right hand. So students who find measure 12 difficult should practice the broken octaves alone to perfect the forearm rotation and and then add the thirds. In measurement 13 to 14, following the prelude's climax, pay close attention to the details of the articulation, including the teasing syncopated accents in the right-hand chords on the second and last 16 notes of measurement 13 to 14. The presence of the right-hand contrapuntal lines in measurement 15 and 16, and 21 and 22 makes the shaping of the left-hand melody through measurements 15 and 22 problematic, because if you have to hold a contrapuntal development with one hand, ideally you won't think of making accompaniment for a contrapuntal line because you're already developing it. This is, I think, creativity or curiosity, because it's an early work, but I think it's really interesting. And in these measures, where the right hand plays both the upper voice and the accompanying thirds, try to keep the thirds as soft as possible to allow room for both leading melodies. In order to balance the voices, use the arm, and you can use the arm weight to support the weaker fingers of the right hand upper voice, and only the fingers weight to play the thirds. Yeah, I don't know if you have seen this in electronic music, but there is always the necessity of the need for having a balance between the strong and the weak. Or I don't know, if you have seen someone that falls into the trap of believing that electronic music is all about strength and fake muscles, you might be dying of laughing already. I know, but the point is to balance them, because you can be stronger with some and delicate with others. Yeah. So the right hand theme must ring out clearly, whether it is above, like in the measures 21, 22, within measure 23, fourth, 8th note, or below, which is the measure 24, the accompanying thirds. So the pianissimo can appear suddenly throughout the prelude. The damper pedal should be used only sparingly to emphasize accents. So this here is one way that you can use to compose anything that you want to, or that you have in your mind, because it's playing, toying around with the possible combinations or definitions or declarations or establishments of the pianissimo dynamic. It can be sudden, it can be long, it can be maintained, it can be the starring protagonic paper, but also can be the soft accompanying one, in terms of a high speed motion kind of thing. Then there's another prelude. I don't know if playing it. Let's find out, because I think I have it here already. I think I have it here somewhere. I'm gonna search for it and I'll be back to you in just a second. Pause period. I don't know, I didn't find it, but I'm gonna play some music. I'm gonna play some piano, and then we go to what we were supposed to be and talk about it some more. So then the second one is set to is said to have almost the same shape without the coda, ABA, and there is these measurements of measure 1 to 9 and 9 to 15 and 15 to 21, respectively ABA. And one of the formative influences on Shostakovich's piano style was the repertoire of symphonic transcriptions that he played as a youth. This prelude is an early example of this influence. It is a colorful tone picture of in G Mixolydian, yet the unstoppable bass tremolo that underpins the work has an orchestral quality about it. And you can think of tremolos that can be found in the later piano works, such as the preludes in G major, in the E flat minor, the number 14 of the Opus 34, the prelude in E flat minor, Opus 87, number 14, and the Concertino for two pianos, and a flowing tempo in the range of quarter equals 50, 60 approximately, is suitable. In the first 10 measures, the musical fabric consists of 3 layers: the leading melody on top, the interior ostinato chords, which form their own melody, and the tremolo tonic pedal in the bass. Again, the leading melody on top, which is the melodic development that you may have on your creativity, and the interior ostinato chords. If you don't know how to make an ostinato, well, you'll have to find out how to make an ostinato. But an ostinato, as its word suggests, is an iteration over a specific development or over a specific fragment, over a specific phrase. But remember that in terms of piano music, if you're writing a sonata for piano and you start making an ostinato over the phrase, you will end up with a concerto kind of thing, and it sounds incoherent a little because it seems out of space to have such an enormous space to development and to deploy and to change and to, sort of work with if you are doing a sonata and for only one piano. It requires a lot more things. So eventually the ostinato must adhere to the instrument and to certain levels, to the limits of the shape that you are creating. If you are creating a concerto and you make an ostinato over a motif, you might need to do it in a creative way. But if you do it in that must prove to be challenging. But if you do it on a piano chamber quartet kind of thing, it might be way easier to keep consistency and maintain coherence. And ostinato is very basically that. And so ostinato changes from instrument to instrument. For example, in Baroque music, it's very common to see that the cello has an ostinato on the bass line. Although the register of the cello is not that low, but at the time it was a little too forbidden to use trombone for the bass line, which is what's correct for most standards, I believe, to use the bass with the brass, because the brass can approach the bass on a wide line, and the cello, if it is for soloist, can express its conditions in, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. And the ostinato can be 8 notes mixed within quarter note, 8th note, 16th note, 2nd note, 4th, 8th, 16, 8th, 16, 4th, 4th, 4th. And you iterate over that kind of thing. First on G, and then a 4th over, and then a 2nd below, and then a 7th over, and then a 4th below. And you start moving about it on the subdominant region. And then you have your ostinato. Just try to not make it too long if your piece is not longer than 7 minutes, because you will end up interrupting rather than concluding if you use, a plagal or authentic perfect kind of cadence. Yeah. And add to that a tremolo in the tonic for the bass. Of course, you can make it with any kind of combination, with any kind of disposition, with any kind of melodic location, melodic position, inversions and whatnot. In this case, in measure 11, Shostakovich adds a fourth layer, which is the A pedal above the bass tremolo. And it is worthwhile to practice different combinations of two layers before putting them all together. Passages in which the left hand plays two layers require special attention and must be practiced separately. The relentless tremolo, thinking two groups of 3/16 notes per quarter, and must be soft and its rhythm even. This task is further complicated by the leaps between the solid upper chords and the first note of the tremolo, and although there are some opinions that instruct for the interior chords to not appear until the second beat of measure 9, it is advisable that the left hand take over the chords from the third beat of measure 8, and in this case the left hand tremolo will have to be performed without its first 16th note, just as it is 3 beats later. Another possibility is to roll the wide chords with the right hand. And so it is crazy what I'm about to say. So I'm about to say it with the foundation of physics, so nobody can fuck with me and nobody can get the contrary out of it to me. Think about it the following way. If I play the fourth string of the cello, C note, C2, I guess it is, C3, C2, C2, yeah, right, C2. If I play that note for enough long time, I will obtain an F over it, a layer of F over it. If I play that F as an harmonic, because you know that the harmonic of C on the fourth finger of the first position is an F, and if you play that, you might obtain another layer over it. And if you keep fucking around, you will end up having multiple sounds. That's called the harmonic series. The harmonic series happens by itself. Period. It's a proven theory of physics which states that I am right about what I'm about to say. For example, no, but for real, I'm trying to be as serious as possible. I'm not drunk. I'm trying to be serious. But eventually, if we look back at our example on using pianissimo or pianissimo for a long period of time with repeating short notes at a really fast pace, you might realize that you can create an interesting effect interacting with the harmonic series. And all these last 2 seconds were pure silence, filled with reverb, filled with delay, filled with release, filled with sustain and decay. And because it is so pianissimo, because it is not, the protagonist is not at the center of the scene, is somewhere hidden, but you can still see, because there is light on its presence, on its position, the protagonizing kind of story, kind of situation, kind of verb being conjuncted here, and the thing, that situation on the story might be there happening in a small, tiny fraction of the screen, although you have in front some big and other things happening too that are not important. The harmonic series is like letting to the imagination what's gonna happen with those two back there in a tiny section of the screen that you are not sure if they are talking, if they are asking questions, if they are establishing sentences, if they are making definitions, building definitions, if they are giving each other explanations, if they are setting up some rules because they are concerned with the language. You have no idea, and that's up for imagination. Or they're complaining about something in an ironical character. You have no idea. They are just far away. You have no way, no clue to divinate what's going on because you can barely see what's going on there. And that's what happened with the harmonic series. So I didn't want it to flood with tons of fast moving notes because I wanted it to, I am correct about what I'm about to say. I have no proof of it. I have no evidence of it, but I think it's correct. If you use little size fragments of fast moving notes in short duration, you might end up allowing the harmonic series and other things to appear in your imagination through sound the same way. Let's see. Yeah, what I want to approach with this is what I've been approaching with Megadol lately, which is the fact that not everything that the music needs to use to conclude and to make a statement needs to be expressed by the instruments. It can be done by virtue of acoustics, by virtue of the room, by virtue of the sustain, the release, the decay, the delay, the reverb. You know, these parameters that deal with postponing time and postponing elements of time and postponing effects of inducing time and delaying the thing, because that creates some sort of cloud where electricity, matter, and fiber are gonna occur. Like your ideas, they stay on the heavens like the clouds. Why? Because the same reason that the clouds never fall to the ground and crash themselves against the floor. That's the same logic of your projects, of your ideas, of your self-esteem and your identity. It doesn't depend on a profile or on a canon or on a predefined cliche. It doesn't mean that, whether you like it or not. I like my identity a lot, but that doesn't mean you have to like yours, because you might probably say my identity is shitty. I rely on a profile that belongs to a urban subculture, and that sort of hides the entire thing and allows me to develop my personality. But personality equals not identity. It nevers. So you might want to get better at it and say, no, my discipline is what develops my identity. So what is the discipline that I hold very often? If I never stop smoking cigarettes because my putrefact lungs and I am rotten inside, then that's my identity. I'm a rotten person. That's what I should be called in my subculture. Hello, rot. What up, rots? How is it rotten? Yeah, rottening. Yeah, very, very, very rot. Very rot. Rot and rot. So the ostinato, the tremolo, and the A pedal. So, yeah, another possibility is to interrupt the rolling with the right hand. And so you get to choose that not every time you have to pronounce the first note of every bar to create a phrase that uses the first pulse of every bar to be strong. If you want a strong phrase or a strong section or a strong fragment or a strong motif or a strong theme, it basically depends on how you continue that fragment or phrase or whatever that you're doing to develop the melodic statement. It doesn't matter that if you don't use the first pulse, it's gonna be weak. Important to remember that. And now back to pianissimo techniques. Pianissimo and fortissimo are in a different context. Year 1826 to year 1900. Pianissimo y dolcissimo. Sorry, I made the surprise wrong. I break up the surprise. What an idiot. Pianissimo and fortissimo are no longer associated Pianissimo with shadows and obscure mysteries of Catholicism. And fortissimo is no longer associated with the flames of fire, which is a very basic definition, you know. They tell you the flames of fire. Yeah, yellow color. Do you know how to use other tones or colors? No? Oh, okay, goodbye. Need to find a place where the theory is a little more wide. And for that comes the 18th century almost, where pianissimo and fortissimo is associated to dolcissimo. Super sweet and beautiful melodies like Tchaikovsky's second movement, Tchaikovsky's first movement in D major for piano, for violin, Sergei Rachmaninoff. They tend to use this notion of beauty, and they change the paradigm completely. And so you can unite BAEB, a motif in that kind of shape, BAEB, into a smooth line, and so you can make a slight crescendo toward the E, followed by a diminuendo to the last B. And remember that in this formalism, one very often uses regulators. The subito piano occurs between 3 bars. Inside these 3 bars, there is a diminuendo, or you can do it more subit. And so one, and then this bar is next is super soft, or at the next one is super strong. Like for example, this change here, we had it there, which is super soft, and then comes the main string. Right, that one last note in the mix sounds way bigger because it has a lot of room. That's the problem with analyzing stems, that you never know what is the actual dynamic of the thing, because you need to have the master or the compressor of the master and the compressor of each track and the compressor of each channel doing their thing to evaluate whether or not there is something behind, something more behind, and something more behind than that. Yeah. So, because if we think about it, this sounds as loud as the other one. They all sound the exact same value. But regardless of that, the point is that there are subtle changes in volume that can help with this dolce kind of thing. And from the second beat of measure 3, you could do that the soprano takes the lead, the melodic line must be smooth. And so you avoid accents on the note plate simultaneously, with the interior chords not being necessarily accented. I always, I always, I always think of the unisomy Corpac solution as so 7 notes for each pulse on each bar. No, it's terrible. It's cancer, bro. Land of cancer. So yeah, you can shape a gradual crescendo, avoiding a premature climax. And the culmination, and you can see that the theory of premature climax appears in art very often, because it is important for the mind not to be pushed and not to be rushing everything, you know. And I'm in a rush to obtain something. Just solve my little problem, please, with your unisomy Corpac solution to a problem of music. Sure. Shape a gradual crescendo. And yeah, a prelude can be culminated by reaching the second beat. And it requires sometimes, in this case, a strongly accented bell-like chords. And once you are strong at there, you can use a preparation for any recapitulation. It is much like with a let me say this. No, let me say this. It is much like in a magic trick. It is much like in a magic trick. When you're doing a magic trick, you need to distract the attention so many times that a certain point after distracting after distracting the after distracting the attention so much, you get to a point in which you can recapitulate the entire trick to increase the effect. And you can recapitulate the entire trick to say the effect, and you start like, okay, so far we have this and we have done this and we have tried this and we failed here, so let's find out if we are not gonna fail again. Let's proceed. Someone from the public, and this kind of decorations to the trick. The trick is already happened. You are decorating the entire scene to make it more fun and to have it more impact and be giant and the kind of thing of magic. And in preparation for the recapitulation, you stop at the second bar, which is the weak pulse, with a strong bell-like accent. Yeah. And then you can do one of these things, which is solve the cadence from a chord at the fourth pulse of the bar, being forte. And then you can accommodate the diminuendo of the next bar to a piano and with separate notes from one another. You separate them and at the next, like a caesura, but in the case of after the caesura, you start with this melodic development in piano or pianissimo. It's like a magic trick. Every time I try to talk about the magic trick and how to distract the attention, this bro comes to put the hand in my mouth. So yeah, I tend to think that for this technique the damper pedal is indispensable, because the damper pedal allows you to sort of, how do you say deafen, when you need certain attacks to be deaf, but that it doesn't interrupt the articulation of the moving kind of melody. Well, damping it. The word is correct. The damper damps the motion. Yeah, I have no other way to say it. And it's indispensable. And you can change the pedal according to the interior chords. So the pedal can be held for longer stretches to support the intensifying dynamics and its harmonic density. Like you could change the pedal on beats 1 and 2 and then held through beat 4. That kind of adds certain beautiful density and beautiful complexity. And in music, I tend to think that aiming for an enchanting pianissimo. Oh my God, here we go again. Can you remove Can you remove the thing from my mouth? The enchanting pianissimo tone color. You can always achieve that. You can always aim at it. Indeed, you can always use all the instruments at its smallest level of volume with the least effort to make them sound, so that they are really small in presence. And the rest is done by the amplifiers, by the compressor, by the limiter, by the gain measurement, by the equalizer. Sure, because that's what allows the music to be really, really spontaneous, and it doesn't get tired. It is not exhaustive. Yeah, because sometimes people confuse this notion of less is more by saying that if you play it small and then you amplify it, you have no way to stop the increasing motion of the volume, and the way to stop it is with a limiter at the end of your chain. the limiter at the end of your chain. I mean, you send the pianissimo guitar to a pedal, to another pedal, to another pedal, to another pedal, 100 pedals, and they go to an amplifier, and the amplifier goes to a compressor, and the compressor goes to another pedal, and the pedal goes to somewhere else, and the somewhere else to somewhere else to somewhere else to somewhere else, forever and ever, and then finally you go to a limiter, and that limiter is the one that you place inside the mixing board, right? That limiter is not for amplifying, that limiter is for attenuating, so it always needs to hold a negative value. You always need to hold it at -6, -5, because if you are starting at mezzo piano, you might argue, and you'd be right, that what if I want more expression and I play some mezzo forte and forte and I break everything? That's correct. But if you have a limiter at the end of your change before getting inside the mixing board, you won't have that problem, because the limiter won't allow you to pass, but it also will not cut the fact that the guitar is expressing more strength. Can't. Only you can measure that. Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm a little tired. Maybe we can play some music. What music can we play? Oh my goodness. Let's find out. It is said that there is another prelude and fugue in E minor, but I don't think there is any record of that. I'm gonna play one which is in E minor, but I'm sure it's not the one that is referred to as the one that existed from his early works. Because I'm sure his early works were not published, and if they were published, at least they were lost. It's hard to embrace and accept the idea that when you are a young composer, nobody wants to know about you. And there is a reasonable reason, the damper damps. No, but there is a reasonable argument to it, and it is that being a composer is expensive. Moreover, publishing a composer is super expensive, bro, because you have to find many instruments and people to evaluate and analyze and determine whether or not your papers are correct. You need people to play the thing. It costs them time, it costs them resources, and you need a place, ideally an auditorium. It takes forever. So yeah, I don't disagree in that it is expensive, but it's sort of a complication, you know. Yeah. Yeah, right. So we can argue this has the same structure: ABA 1 to 18, 18 to 29, 29 to 43 respectively. It's Allegro moderato, three-part form. Um, and we can disagree very often in what is a robust, heroic prelude that emanates resolute power and romantic passion. It is each other. It is up to you, your call. It depends on your product and how you're going to sell it, market it, and branding it. And whether you like the branding and marketing of your product, whether it is a joke about someone else, or whether it is a joke about yourself, or whether it is a joke about you making jokes on everybody, like Tasmanian Devil, I don't know. It's your call. But here we come to a different kind of exploration, which is the polyphonic textures. But we can agree that lively yet not rush tempo, articulations predominantly staccato, spiced with numerous dramatic accents, and that it is important, almost vital, to sustain the rhythmic energy from beginning to end. And it's important to resist the temptation to introduce excessive rubato or lengthening of beats that might shift the rhythmic pattern measurement metric. Like, you can end up, if you do so many lengthening or on an excessive rubato, you might end up pushing the 5/8 meter toward 6/8 and not noticing it. It's really that easy to make a mistake. Well, yeah, the two measure motif, and it is a long one. It can add up. I mean, you can argue, you'd be right, that any phraseological fragment that you develop, any capsule phrase that you develop, can be developed so much into a symphony, culminating into a giant work. And so there is this motif technique to measure, to the two measure motif. Ideally, a motif is 1 bar long. And so you can make it consisting of two groups of 5/8 notes. But in the case of these, of our heroic, robust prelude, we can perform this motif as a single undivided unit and building a crescendo toward the dynamic high point on the first beat. So it's a long, very, very long crescendo. And then you shape a similar but brighter crescendo from the 4/8 note of the measure 4 at the center of it to the first beat of two measures later, which could be the measure 6 in our example. And the third crescendo can be raised to the first forte and should be even stronger. So if you're thinking of adding notes to the dyads to become triads, to become tetrads, to become seventh chords, to become ninth chords, and to start increasing the register, if you start at C4, you might say that if you have three crescendos and in between each crescendo and each other, you might place a bar of a connection, then you might argue that you could change from C4 to the register of C5 and then to the sixth octave, and depending on what the character was at the time. So, and one caveat of good taste. This culmination is enhanced, is not conclusive, is not finished. Please. It is enhanced by more accents in both hands. I am the position that these kinds of things are done with damper. Because I come from an electronic music background. And if you think about it, yeah, symphonically too. It is too ordinary. Yeah, it's too ordinary to think that it will end up bam, 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 bam. Not always, and it depends on the context. I am not a composer of that era. It is almost property of Beethoven, who doesn't make it incorrectly, does it really well. But it is not my style. I don't suggest. I think I suggest against it, and I have mixed feelings about it. You could do the exact same thing sul tasto with a damper with the same duration, accented, interrupting the accent so it is a la corda. But yeah, it is not conclusive. It ends up with so many accents. What if it doesn't stop there? I mean, you could stop there and say the piece is finished. I ended up having a robust, heroic ending, or like a grand finale. The grand finale, I believe, is more melodic, is more developed, and it has a long, long ending theme. But yeah, no, it's a robust, heroic finale. And what if it doesn't? If your piece doesn't end there? Well, Shostakovich figured out that this heroic, robust sort of thing can be the opening for a short canon. You remember the canon? One voice and then another voice repeats on a different timbre, repeats exactly the same. The first thing the one was doing, and the one that was doing it first now is doing the accompaniment, and then the accompaniment that is done by the first is done by the second, and then what the first one was doing on the first one and the second one is now developed on the third one, and there is a third one doing the main melodic statement, and so forth. Canons are really complicated to handle. Canons are really difficult. Canons, to me, are like major and minor structures in harmonic involvement, or the structure of a scale, because it is too complicated to hold the consistency of a scale only using one region. For example, the major scale only has one region, which is tonic and dominant. But if you change to subdominant region, you're altering the scale. It is, and you are not placing new alterations to the structure. How do you notice that? No, it is really complicated. I don't feel comfortable with it. And I think I understand why from it came the development of harmony and voice leading. Because if you have the entire ciphered harmony, you can develop whatever you wanted to have, and then you don't depend on whether you have a scale or you don't have a scale. You have, the leading voice toward the cipher, and that proves really comfy, which doesn't quit its complexities. Anyway, back to major minor. They are really complicated. If you want an example of how complicated they can get, you can listen to second piano concerto and third piano concerto of Rachmaninoff. They're very often in minor, and then they change to major, and then they change to minor with such a skill. I think I have never tried a major minor kind of thing in a scale because it's too complicated for me. Although the synthetic scales are way more complicated to build. You have to invent the scale. If you look at the papers, I have the papers here. Let's play some music while I figure out the papers. No, I haven't found it. I just thought it'd be cool if I played the entire song. Well, hell yeah. And after this brief, and you can see here that this is a synthetic scale. If you can I make it bigger? Wait a second. Yeah, this B flat, F sharp, B flat. This is kind of a crazy, but it is the way the Phantom of the Opera was made. There is based off synthetic scales, have different alterations, different kind of things, and different kind of the elements, whatever. So this is the sort of thing when measuring your approach, when measuring, if you want, a canon, for example, it is easy because a synthetic scale does not depend on the things that are absent on the scale. In fact, you're placing so many limits that it is impossible to get lost, but they are harmonically coherent. Of course, I am not such a friend of spectacular crescendo accelerando technique, because it can be jumpy as a circus, a bad, cheap circus. The real circus, is really expensive. And to make it look interesting, it can... well, we have an example of an expensive acceleration crescendo, or at least a dynamic of development increasing. Because if you think about it here, it has let me see. I think it is here. I think you're gonna hear what I'm gonna hear too, but I don't care. This is the preparation for the grand finale, and through it then comes the violin accelerating as the ensemble is increasing the tension. So far, up till this point, all the units that the first violin is using are part of whatever set of units is being set for... oh my gosh, I can make it smaller. You see that, as Professor Bartok said, you don't need to use bar lines if you know what you're doing, if you don't get lost easy, if you are really strong on what your beliefs, in what your thoughts are, and what you stand up for, then it is impossible to get lost because you have a curve direct to the origin of everything. That's discipline, and it's a caliber of excellence within yourself towards the discipline of your development of identity. Some call it religious rituals, but I have come to discover some people who use not necessarily the same religious rituals that I use, but personal rituals, like writing a movie, drawing a painting, using music, assimilating music, studying music through the papers and listening to the recording and watching the paper of their favorite artists is a kind of personal development ritual that becomes a discipline so many often in finding the small little details that you consider are shitty or that are interesting to formulate yourself and to establish yourself with an opinion, a criterion that is valid, based on facts, numbers, experimentation, and experience, which is important to have these conditions for your opinion to be valid. And if you see that somebody corrects you and says, no, it's not as valid because it has been long in disuse for this and that reason, then you might be in a good position to update your opinion and your position, and keep learning. Don't get tired, ever. But in my case, I don't like using bars particularly for this, I think I never used bars. Yeah, when the bass, because the bass is almost super protagonist here, then I used bars to, because it uses a phrase in one pedal and then changes. Let me see if I have here. A phrase in one pedal and then another phrase in another pedal. For example, here, where is it? Ha ta ti da da ta 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 di ta ta di ta ti ta di ti ti. This is a completely new thing, and if you keep going and going, here's the terror. I changed from I was playing the bass in the recording of this album, and I changed from ball dropper to terror. And the phrase for the terror is totally different. And let's find out here. Terror ad libitum. And then somehow it changes. I didn't mark up here, but this is Hades. Ta di ta ti ta 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 di ta 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 di ta 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 ti da ta di da ti mastermind ta di da ti ta ti da ris. In the nouns here for ta di da ti ta ti da, it's one pedal and then another change of pedal to the ris to continue from the how do you say the upbeat of the empty bar, and then again ball dropper ti ta taridura tiridura tira tira tiri 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 ta ta tira ta tiri ta tari ta tararita 1 2 3 and 4, and then ris that sort of thing forced me to use the bars between the bar lines between bars to distinguish that the bass player is some. I'm sure some people might want to use this course, and that's the real idea behind having the score being published. I'm working on the rights and the registering on the thing and managing the copyrights of the entire Phantom of the Opera thing to me, so I'm not able to place them commercially or outly, out loud for the public. But at some point they will come, and my idea is that for example, for practicing and for rehearsing and for having part of the of your repertoire, is very interesting to have a piece such as this one, not only because it is beautiful and virtuosistic, but because it excels at certain difficult things that need to be mastered. And as such, I was trying to say that up till here, up till 502, all the values in the notes were part of this dynamic of dividing or subdividing by 12. Remember that subdividing by 12 can lead to you dividing and counting thirds, triplets, seconds, thirds, fourths in triplets, or 12 eighth notes, or 12 quarter notes. 1 2 3 4 6 7 8 9 10 12. No, it's complicated and it's a compound measurement, and I am not gonna go too much into it. But the point is that it has its familiar set of rhythmic structures and notes that belong to it. In a way, you know that 18th notes, 16th notes, and in 8th notes and quarter notes in a binary measurement are different than in a ternary measurement. And that's horrible, because they are written the same way. You have no way to distinguish the groove that each carries. In the case of 12, it's even more complicated because you don't know if you are ternary or binary, and it's a mix of the two. It's called compound, but it is complicated. And at that point, so far, the first violin was using the ones that belong and pertain to the 12 subdivision. And at a certain point, I said, no, let's accelerate. This thing is going to end. This is the preparation for the main theme of the grand finale. Use quadruplets. That is the kind of thing that I was trying to mention about this technique, which is really complicated to approach. Let me hide this. Which is very complicated to approach. About in this case, we were saying a robust, heroic kind of finale. And using this crescendo e molto with acceleration, grandioso, crescendo, spectacular, it's kind of complicated, because if I were to do it in a major scale, it would be a mess of incoherent with coherent, coherence with incoherence. No, I think to me it's so difficult. I never mastered that technique, and I think I'm not gonna master it yet. Old Parrot New Orleans, I don't know. And this technique is often associated or explained with the fact that you can make sure that the pedal changes on the first two beats of it, and that they are clean, and that one pedal is held through the second and third beats of the measures, that the B, prolonged by a fermata or whatever, receives the necessary harmonic support. But I did it necessarily differently, and the harmonic rhythm was done by the terror on the bass, and the violin was having this crescendo grandioso, spectacular, accelerando, whatever, into it without the pedal, and then the pedal came as an answer. So you can get creative and move and displace things a little bit by one bar, 2 bars later happen that. Yeah. And yeah, that's kind of the dynamic toward that triumphant triple F ending. Triple F in the sense of fortissimo. Don't get confused. I'm not like that. And of course, the awkward fingering crossing. Yeah, that's important. It can be eliminated with a simple rearrangement of the notes. It will sound exactly the same as with a unison MIDI Corpac solution to the problem of music. Thank you so much for being here today. I don't know when am I gonna do another video of this, talking about techniques of musical composition, theory, a bit of the unreleased music, a bit of what I am doing. But if you enjoyed this one, I enjoyed it too much too. So eventually, I don't know when another video like this one is gonna go out. But if you like it, give it a like, share, subscribe, comment for more of other things, because I don't know when I'm gonna be. Yeah, I think if you want to know, I'm editing the scores of the Phantom of the Opera, and I have so much work on it. So I am investing all my time on that, and in the Chinese album, which is also in the works. There's tons to be done, so there's not too much time to do videos like this, because they are time consuming to make, and for the mind they are more expensive than the ones, like, for example, talking about music, talking about other kind of things, and making opinions about other YouTubers' videos. That's way more softer on my brain. But after this video, I think I'm gonna need 16 hours sleep till it is 10 p.m. because it is like 10 a.m. and once at 10 p.m. I wake up, pray a little bit, and then at 11 go back to sleep again, because these drain all my energy and all my power. So see, yeah, sorry if I can't make any of these videos again or anytime soon. But regardless, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed. Unison Medical Pack, thank you for sponsoring this video. Bye.